Overwatch 2 brought a sweeping range of changes to how the game plays, including role passives, new heroes, and most importantly, a switch to a 5 versus 5 format. However, there is one change that had a massive impact on the entire game that many people seem to completely overlook, and that is the change to how armor functions in Overwatch 2. Now, before we get any further, my dog has an important announcement that she needs to make. Wow, thank you so much for your incredible advice, Bella. You are truly enlightened. Getting into how armor was changed, let's first go into how armor worked in Overwatch 1, because back then it was the most needlessly complicated mechanic ever, and I don't even think the game ever even tells you about how it works. So in Overwatch 1, armor would reduce the damage you take from any given damage source by 50%, up to a maximum of 5 damage being negated. So anytime the damage was below 10, it would be reduced by half. So a projectile that dealt 6 damage would now deal 3, and if the damage dealt was above 10, then it would be reduced by 5. So a projectile that dealt 20 damage would now only deal 15. This made armor incredibly useful against heroes that fired many low damage projectiles, reducing the damage they deal to armor by 50%. While being almost useless against snipers and heroes that fire very high damage projectiles. This is a particularly strange decision when you have heroes like Reaper, who are kind of meant to be these high damage tank busters, but because the damage for shotguns is calculated by individual pellets, and not by each complete shot, his damage gets completely cut in half against armor. In Reaper's case, each shot fires 20 bullets that each deal a base of 5.4 damage, meaning a normal shot would deal 108 damage total, but against armor it deals only 54. This means that Cassidy in Overwatch 1 would deal more damage than a Reaper against tanks that had armor, since they both have similar firing speeds, but Reaper would deal 54 damage, while Cassidy would deal 65, since his damage only gets dropped down by 5. Now in Overwatch 2, the way armor functions has been completely redone. Now instead of the complex mess that it was before, armor now provides a 30% damage reduction across the board for any damage taken by the armor part of the hero's health pool. So heroes that had high damage projectiles like Hanzo, Pharah, Junkrat, etc., have all had their performance against tanks drastically nerfed compared to Overwatch 1, while heroes with low damage projectiles like Tracer, Sombra, Reaper, Roadhog, etc. have had their damage against tanks boosted drastically. However, there's also a third category of heroes that got nerfed with this armor change, and those are heroes that inflict beam-type damage, and also heroes that inflict damage over time effects. This is because while in early Overwatch 1, these heroes suffered the same against armored targets, having their damage reduced drastically and in some very inconsistent ways. However, in March of 2019, Overwatch received an update which added Baptiste to the game, and it also completely changed how these two damage types interacted with armor, giving them their own set of rules. Beam-type weapons such as Maze Freeze, Moira's Suck and her ult, Symmetra, Winston and Zarya's primary fire, would now have their damage reduced by a flat 20% when damaging armor, and damage over time effects, including Ana's primary, Ass's Dynamite, Widowmaker's Venom Mine, and others were completely immune to the effects of armor, and would no longer have their damage decreased at all. So in Overwatch 2, these weapon types now fall under the armor rules of having their damage reduced by a flat 30%. So beam-type weapons did get nerfed by a bit coming to Overwatch 2, while damage over time effects have been giga-nerfed with Overwatch 2, at least when comparing how effective they are against armor. Now, with armor being more consistent with how it blocks damage, this also starts to create some problems. One of which is that armor is now just so incredibly strong across the board that there is a massive gap in survivability between tanks that do have armor and tanks that don't. Tanks with armor just have directly more health than those without. If you compare a hero like Reinhardt to a hero like Junker Queen, who has 450 health and no armor, comparing Rein's 600 total health with Junker Queen's 450 total health, it seems like it's a pretty fair comparison. However, because Rein's health pool includes 250 armor, It takes approximately 357 damage to break through that 250 armor, making Reinhardt's total effective health 707, which is over 50% more health than Junker Queen and the other 450 health tanks have. These lower than average health tanks are still able to function though due to how they are designed. Doomfist is incredibly mobile and gets rewarded with a small amount of overhealth as a little treat for hitting his abilities. Junker Queen has Commanding Shout, which gives her approximately 5 seconds to do enough to win the fight or force the enemy team to retreat, or else she is completely screwed. But Junker Queen is built with so much damage that it's a task that is actually very feasible for her to accomplish. Zarya has one of the best personal damage mitigation abilities in the game in the form of her bubbles. She can bank 2 of them to use at different times, and each bubble is capable of blocking upwards of 200 damage, since any leftover damage from the projectile that breaks her bubble will be negated as well. Damaging her bubbles also grants her charge, so enemies are forced to either try and damage through her effective 850 health, including both her bubbles, and power her up in the process, or just not fire at her at all when she's using her bubbles. However, this will just allow her to walk into your team for free for the 2 seconds it takes for each bubble to expire. Roadhog also doesn't have armor, but he's a very different case from the other 3 armorless tanks, in that Roadhog has 700 base health, and his ability, Take a Breather, self-heals himself for 350 health, while also giving him 50% damage reduction while he's using it, so he's very tanky in other means even if he doesn't have armor. Ramattra also technically doesn't have any armor in his Omnic form, but he does get some when transforming into his tankier Nemesis form, so he gets a pass since his Omnic form is kind of supposed to be more frail and focused on ranged poke damage. Now let's get into why this survivability starts to become problematic with certain tanks, and it all has to do with healing. Because armor provides a constant 30% damage resist, each 10 points of armor health is worth approximately 14.3 points of standard health. However, armor does not impact the amount of healing that a hero receives, so any healing is approximately 43% more effective when healing armor compared to healing standard health. Using Reinhardt as a comparison, as according to Overbuff he is the highest win rate tank at every single skill tier for this month, let's take a scenario where the enemy team has a Reinhardt that is going ham, he's going in, he's brawling, and he's being pocketed by an Ana from the backline. Ana has also thrown her biotic grenade onto the Reinhardt, boosting the healing that he receives by 50%. You would need to be dealing 201 damage per second to the Reinhardt just to start beating out the healing that he is receiving from the Ana. This is due to the healing first getting boosted by the biotic grenade, and then getting further boosted by the fact that armor takes 30% less damage but still receives the same amount of healing as health does. However, this can get much worse, so let's make it worse. One common complaint back in Season 2 was that Orisa would sometimes just feel straight up unkillable, so let's set up the worst case scenario featuring an Ana and an Orisa, with no ultimates being used, just abilities. So the Orisa has armor, she is using Fortify. She was hit by her Ana's biotic grenade, boosting healing by 50%. How much damage would you need to be dealing in order to outpace the healing that she is receiving and start to whittle her down? The answer is 335 damage per second. This specific combination of abilities creates an effective healing output that's even stronger than Zenyatta's Transcendence, at least when you're using Transcendence on a hero that doesn't have armor. Yeah, this is incredibly stupid, but it is at least only a temporary combination of multiple abilities, as the healing boost and Fortify will eventually wear off, but it's still absolutely ridiculous, which is why it's important to try and target these supports before trying to kill especially bulky tanks, or at least try to keep the support distracted so they can't be healing their tank as efficiently. You also have to consider what especially is insane about the Orisa theoretical situation, is that with Fortify, you cannot even be headshot. So at least with the Reinhardt, you can hit him with headshots to double your damage output and try to break through the pocket healing. But with Orisa, you can't even do that. So it just makes the whole situation even worse with the Orisa, because you can't even double your damage with headshots, and you need to get to 335 damage per second to even start effectively dealing damage to her. It is really insane. This insane amount of damage reduction is only possible due to how damage reduction effects stack. Since while Blizzard did have the foresight to try and limit how damage reduction effects stack, the way they implemented it is very strange. Damage reduction applied via abilities and ultimates is different than the damage reduction applied from armor. So while Blizzard did place a hard cap at 50% damage reduction, the damage reduction still gets added multiplicatively with the 30% damage reduction from armor, meaning that the highest damage reduction you can achieve is from a nano target with armor, which is 65% damage reduction. So because damage reduction from abilities and ultimates don't stack, this means that using Fortify while nanoed won't actually decrease your damage taken. It will technically a little bit because you can't get headshot, but it doesn't actually add that 40% to the nano boost 50%. And Bastion's Ironclad passive will also not take effect because just the nano boost alone already gets you to the cap of 50% damage reduction. So just as a quick comparison to show how these damage reductions all stack, here's the damage that results from 2 Ana primary fires on different targets. Against a Soldier 76 with no armor, it deals 150 damage. Against an Orisa that has armor, it deals 105 damage. And against an Orisa with both armor and Fortify active, after having to remove the temporary overhealth, the 150 damage that Ana deals is reduced to only 62 damage. With Reinhardt dominating the ranked ladder right now with just how bulky he is when pocketed and how effectively he can brawl, it begs the question of what Blizzard needs to do in order to address these issues with stacking all of these different heal boosting and damage reduction effects that make tanks borderline unkillable. But honestly, I'm not sure if it's something that needs to be addressed in the first place. The most extreme examples all require using multiple abilities and other resources to really multiply the pocket potential to keep these tanks alive. So they aren't going to occur super often, and even then there should be some kind of punishment for just ignoring the enemy's backline and trying to just blindly shoot into a super bulky tank. In the same way that you should be rewarded for targeting the enemy backline, even if it's just to distract them for a brief moment, since in this case, they wouldn't be able to pocket their tank as effectively and they would be easier to kill. Though if armor does continue to be a problem for balance, I think it would be interesting to look into just having the healing that armor receives also be reduced by the 30% that damage gets reduced by, and see how this would feel for both tanks, being able to make space and stay alive, as well as with supports feeling like they're actually able to keep a target alive and provide value for their team through healing. Since even in the worst case scenario, while it may be impossible to do anything to the Orisa alone, if your entire team is focusing down that Orisa with the hardest pocket ever imagined, you will still be able to kill her through the insane pocket. It just requires your entire team to be firing at her at the same time, which in Overwatch 2, that's honestly one of the most unrealistic things imaginable. And well, that's it for this video. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you think that over 300 effective healing per second is completely okay. And until next time, see ya.